Hello, I'm Arnold Cassola. I'm a professor at the University of Malta, and I had taught before at the universities of Catania and the University of Roma La Sapienza. I'm also a little politician with green ideals. And today we shall be talking about the Great Siege of Malta. But the Great Siege of Malta seen from a different perspective. In the sense that I'm interested not so much in the battles, who beat whom in Saint Elmo or in Birgu or in Saint Angelo, etc. But I'm interested in seeing how Suleyman the Magnificent's mind was working before, during, and after the siege. Because when you organize an event, an expedition, an occupying expedition of such big amounts, we're talking here about more or less 40,000 troops. There are a lot of preparations that have to be done, and obviously, it's not a question only of preparations, but also while the siege is on, there are other events which you have to take care of, and other worries, other concerns, because keep in mind that Suleyman the Magnificent was basically the owner, the overpowering person in the whole Mediterranean. The Mediterranean, apart from Malta and apart from Italy, was basically in the hands of the Ottoman Empire. You just think of the Ottoman Empire at that time, and eliminating Italy and Malta, you would have, the Adriatic, Greece, the Balkans, Albania, Bosnia, what is today Bosnia, Herzegovina, what is today Serbia, what is today Montenegro, etc., right up to Turkey, and that is to Istanbul, and that's the European part. That was all in the hands of the Ottoman Empire. We're talking about 16th century. And then you had the Asian part, that was all Ottoman. But not only that, the Mediterranean, southern Mediterranean, leading from Morocco to Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, etc. All this was in the hands of the Ottomans. So there were a lot of things happening all over the place, and Suleyman the Magnificent had to take care of all these things, even while he was conducting a campaign for his men, mainly Mustafa Pasha and Piali Pasha, the admiral, were conducting this expedition in his name here in Malta. I am basing my talk today on my book, which is called Suleyman the Magnificent and Malta 1565. And it's got a subtitle, which is exactly Decisions, Concerns, and Consequences. The decisions he had to take, Suleyman the Magnificent had to take, his concerns, his worries, the daily things he had to take care of during this period, and obviously also certain consequences after the end of the siege. So the attack on Malta, the assault, started on 18th May 1565. But of course, you have to keep in mind that in those times, traveling was not as easy as today, even though today it has become much more difficult because of COVID, unfortunately. But distances, there were no planes. So they arrived in Malta, the Armada, the Ottoman Armada arrived in Malta on 18 May 1565, but it actually left Istanbul, Constantinople, Byzantium, same name for the same, three different names, sorry, for the same place. It left Istanbul 50 days before. The fleet left Istanbul on the 29th of March, 1565, which means that you have to think about provisions, food for those thousands and thousands of people on board the galleys who are traveling to Malta from Istanbul via Turkey, via Greece, what is today Greece, what is today Albania, arriving the final step, which is Navarin, and then the final leg, 10 days to arrive in Malta. You have to feed all those mouths of human beings, but you also had to feed the mouths of horses. There was this cavalry that also formed part of the Ottoman expedition in Malta. So horses have to be well kept on board the ships, fed and taken care of. So all these things were things which one had to worry about. Now, when did Suleyman decide to send this expedition to Malta? We said it left in March 1565, but the decision was taken basically 6 months before, in October 1564. We know all this, and my book is also based on these documents, from the minutes of the Divan. The Divan, it was the Sultan's government, the Ottoman government. Divan, we obviously today have the word divan in most of our languages, which means a sofa, right? A big sofa. Well, it's coming from the Turkish divan, which meant the government, the Sultan's government, because when they met, they sat on divans. And so that is more or less why today the word for this object, which we all have in our sitting rooms, is called divan. So the minutes of the divan show that the decision to attack Malta was taken in October 1564. And what were the reasons for this decision? Well, let's start with the political decisions. The political decisions are clear. Suleyman expresses in his commands, in his various messages, clear concept. He says, the infidels in the island of Malta, the infidels, by the infidels he meant the knights of Malta. You see the different perspectives. We think they are the knights, the noblemen, the heroes, the warriors. The enemy saw them as the infidels. On the other hand, the Ottomans consider themselves to be the heroes, the righteous people, the ones who were on the side of Allah, and saw us, the Christians, as the infidels. It's history which, unfortunately, sometimes repeats itself. So I was saying, he says it clearly. He says the infidels in the island of Malta are disrupting the passage for pilgrims and commerce and merchants between North Africa, basically, between the Western Mediterranean and the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, why was this passage between Istanbul and Morocco so important? But also between Medina and Morocco, and between Egypt and Morocco. Why was it so important? It was important because forming part of the Ottoman Empire, there had to be, some point of contact, continuous contact between the mother country, Turkey at that time, and the dependencies, Tunisia, Libya, etc. There had to be commerce between the areas. So that is the first point. The second point was a religious motivation. Muslims, as we know, should, if possible, at least once in their life, go to Mecca, the sacred city. So you had pilgrims traveling from North Africa to go to Mecca, which is today Saudi Arabia. But what was happening? The Knights of Malta were, whenever these boats had to pass more or less nearby Malta, because Malta is on the way between North Africa and the Maghreb and Istanbul and Egypt and Mecca, and were plundering, attacking these galleys, capturing people, taking them into slavery, ransom, and then obviously there would be the ransom being paid for that, and therefore money being made out of all this. And they would also confiscate whatever goods they found. So this was a very important motivation for Suleyman the Magnificent. A second motivation, which is mentioned in Balbi di Correggio's diary, says that Suleyman intended going into Italy through Sicily after taking Malta. Of course, quite a number of modern historians do not agree on this motivation. But I maintain that this is not a question of agreeing or not agreeing. You might not see the political motivation of going into Italy through Sicily, which is so far away from the center of Italy, when you could go in via Austria and the mainland. But then one must also realize that Suleyman had already tried to go into Central Europe via Austria, and he had failed. So could this have been an alternative way for Suleyman of getting into Italy via the south? Whether we like it or not, this is said by Balbi di Correggio, and it's not today, it's not a historian today interpreting. This is 1568, just 3 years after the Great Siege. Balbi di Correggio's book was published. It is reiterated by Hippolyto Sanz, another knight of San Jacques, who had come to Malta with the grants of Corso, with a big help, who published an epic poem called La Maltea in Xàtiva in Spain, near Valencia, in 1582. And they both say that Suleyman's intention was entering Italy through Sicily after having taken Malta. So these are the first two motivations. We then have another geopolitical motivation. The Knights of Malta had taken Monemvasia, which is the Greek area of Malvasia. And of course, this was another big problem because this was again on the route between Istanbul and Greece, Istanbul and the Mediterranean, the central Mediterranean. And therefore this would cause problems to the Ottoman shipping. But what the final straw was the taking of an island, of a very small island, Peñón de la Gómez, Gómez de la Valera. I forgot the name exactly, to be honest. But and this is near Morocco, an island of Morocco, which again would disrupt Ottoman shipping with Christian forces based over there and attacking the Ottoman shipping. So these were, let's say, the political and the geopolitical motivations for Suleyman to attack Malta. But then there were the personal ones, or the pride ones, I would say. No, pride can influence politics quite a lot. So what is this pride, and what are these personal motivations? Well, first of all, on one occasion, well, on various occasions, but in much nearer the siege of Malta, Romegas, a knight of the Order of St. John, had captured the Grand Sultana, which was the most prestigious galley of belonging to Suleyman the Magnificent. And on board this Grand Sultana was an old woman named Giansevere, whom historians deem to be either the grandmother of, the aunt of one of Suleyman's daughters, or else actually the wet nurse of his favorite daughter, Mirima Sultana. So this daughter was extremely angry that Giansevere had been taken prisoner, and therefore pushed her father into taking action, seeking revenge against the Knight of Malta. So all these things combined together actually resulted in Suleyman taking his decision to attack Malta. So as we said, the fleet left on March 29th, but before that there were loads of preparations. So for example, we know that in December 1564, Suleyman sent out various commands, various orders. In Ottoman, in Turkish, they are called firmans. They were sent out to the various parts of his empire, because remember that the empire was all over, as I said, Europe, at least until Hungary, and all over Asia and North Africa, and asking the different governors to contribute to the expedition, for example, 1,000 men to go to Istanbul. Keep in mind that when the fleet left, not all the people left from Istanbul. A good number left from there, and a good number of galleys, the majority. But as they were moving towards Malta, others joined them on the way. Like, for example, the Bey governor of Selanik, which is Thessaloniki in Greece, or the Bey of Rhodos, the Bey of Rhodes, always with a number of galleys and 1,000 men, for example. We had the Beys of Avlonia, which is today Vlore in Albania. We had the governor of Elbasan, which is today also to be found in Albania. All these were joining the troops as they were moving along towards Malta. But it was not only troops coming from Europe, and there were others. We know of single individuals, at least, who came from other areas of Europe, what the Ottomans called Rumeli, because they actually died in Malta. We know of one soldier who was from Sofia, which is today the capital of Bulgaria. We know of another one who was from Belgrade, which is today the capital of Serbia. But the troops did not only come from Europe, they also came from Anatolia, from what is called Anadolu in Turkish, because you had various parts of the empire which were based in the Asian part of Turkey. But apart from that, we also had the troops coming from North Africa, from the Maghreb, especially Turgut, the famous Turgut Pasha, whom we know as Dragut. Turgut Pasha, was none other than the governor of Trablus, which is Tripoli in Libya, so much nearer Malta, and a person, he was around 8 years of age, and a person who knew Malta very well, who knew the seas surrounding Malta. And Suleyman writes to him and not only asks him to come over to Malta, but asks for his advice on the best way to attack and to plan the assault on Malta, because of his deep knowledge of the area and the seas around Malta. Another governor was Hassan Bey, the governor of Algiers. Hassan came over to Malta, was ordered to come over to Malta with 30 galleys, of course, with thousands of people, and from Algeria. And his duty was that to protect the seas, but from the Italy side, from the Messina side, from Sicily side. And this was to prevent any aid coming over from Italy to help the Knights and the Maltese. It did not work out because we had first had the Piccolo Soccorso, and then we had in July, and then we had the Gran Soccorso, the 8,000 people who did arrive in September. But this was their job. So we have all this organization, as I said, already in December 1564. Suleyman has already written to all these governors and telling them how they can and should and must participate in the Great Siege. But in January, Suleyman sends out in Istanbul messengers in the markets in Istanbul to enroll young lads, 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 17-year-olds, to join in the Malta campaign. And in the offer, special offer, not only would they get a salary for joining in the campaign, but they were also free to loot and to plunder and take away whatever they found when they conquered Malta. Something which they didn't, was not expected, but that was the end result. But this was in the notice, in the legal notice, let's say, in the markets, this was the advert. Join us to Malta, and you can not only will get a salary, but you will also be able to enrich yourself by plundering whatever you had. So this is now 2 months before coming to Malta. Remember that Suleyman needed to attack Malta during the hot months, during the spring and summer months. This was something typical, tactical, strategic thing, was having campaigns when weather was not bad, especially and even more so in an attack and an assault on Malta, which was so far away and which took so much time to get there. 50 days, nearly 2 months, imagine. So it was important that the raid, the assault, ended before the bad weather came in. Because remember that these troops had to go back after they occupied Malta. Most of them would have had to go back to Istanbul. And that would be another 2-month journey, another 50-day journey. So Suleyman, always in his orders, was also stressing the fact that the troops had to leave at the beginning of spring. And that is why they leave on the 29th of March to arrive on the 18th of May, with the intention of being back in Istanbul before the bad weather really comes in. Leaving in September was a must. This way, you would arrive in Istanbul just before the end of the end of October, sorry, which is what happened. But the plans did not go as they went, as they thought. Mustafa Pasha and Piali Pasha did not see eye to eye together. Piali was very jealous. Piali was the admiral. He was in charge of the fleet. Mustafa was in charge of the whole expedition. And Piali was jealous of Mustafa. And when Mustafa, rightly so, decided to attack the center of Malta first, St. Angelo, Birgu, because it was the heart of the island, getting that, you'd have got the rest of the island. Piali said, no, I don't want to risk my fleet. I don't want to have my fleet in open seas where they would be in danger. I would not do that. So Mustafa was basically blackmailed into having to attack St. Elmo. And they thought that it would take them 4 days, 5 days, a week maximum to take St. Elmo. Instead, it took them nearly a month. It took them from around the 25th, 26th of May till the 23rd of June. And Dragut, who arrived later, who did not arrive on the 18th of May, but arrived around 10 days later in Malta, was extremely angry when he arrived, because he also tactically would have and strategically would have attacked, first of all, Birgu, St. Angelo. And he was right, because, as I said, it took them so long to take Fort St. Angelo. They lost over 6,000 people in the process. And what happened is they lost a month instead of a week, which meant that they had less time, apart from losing 6,000 men, they had less time to stay in Malta before having to leave in September. While and even before the battle started in Malta, remember that on the way coming to Malta, Suleyman had to think of provisions, of food, of gathering thousands of kilos of grain to bake pecsiment, for example. Pecsiment is a dry biscuit, what we in Maltese today call a galletta. And this would have to be picked up along the way. Why dry food? Why dry biscuits? Because sort of rusk, because it was resistant to the salt, to the sea weather, on a humid condition, to the humid conditions on a galley, and they could survive and thrive on that. And he had to ensure, Suleyman, and send out orders along the journey so that these were baked, so that when the Armada arrived, they could load them onto the ship. Another worry was gunpowder, black gunpowder, cannonballs. These also had to be loaded onto the ships as they came along. And you could see him writing out orders to the various governors in various areas of the empire to prepare these 14-ounce u'iyya. We have the u'iyya in Maltese. I don't know if it is the exact amount of the Turkish vukiya, but there were 14 vukiya and 16 vukiya cannonballs, the weight, which had to be picked up, plus thousands of tons of antars of kilos of black gunpowder. When they arrived in Malta, then the staple food, the major food, did not come as it did, as the galletti did, the pecsiment did along the way, from Greece, Albania, etc. But it came from North Africa, mainly from Jerba, from Tripoli, and this was fruit and oil. It was much nearer, so it could be fresh fruit, more or less, which took a very few days to come from North Africa. So these were some of the worries he had to worry about. He had even more serious worries. He had the king of Morocco, Abdullah, was fighting and was invading a part of Algeria that were being run by his brothers. At the same time that the war was going on in Malta. The brothers, the Algerian brothers, wrote to Suleyman saying, look, our brother Mustafa is really annoying us. And we have the letters by Suleyman writing to them and saying, don't worry, at the moment I have my troops in Malta. When Malta is conquered, I will send Mustafa or somebody from Malta to take care of the whole affair. But please keep patient for the moment. There were other types of worries. For example, another important one, which shows how important Malta was politically for Suleyman. Just before the Armada was leaving in March, the Khan of Crimea, the leader of Crimea, which was also part of the Ottoman Empire, wrote to Suleyman saying, look, Suleyman, please, we are being attacked by the Russians here in Crimea. As we all know, Crimea is a very strategic city, which is a port, therefore very, very important. We know today how Putin's Russia has taken Crimea away from Ukraine. And there has been a war on that, and there is a lot of attrition between the two today. So even in those times, it was a very important avenue towards the sea. And he says, please send me troops. I need reinforcements. And what does Suleyman answer? He says, I'm sorry, Governor Khan of Crimea, I cannot send you any troops. At the moment, I have an uprising in Hungary. I have a revolt, and I must send reinforcements to Hungary to quell this revolt. And also I am attacking Malta. I'm sending troops to Malta. And therefore I have no troops to spare. I'm sorry. So this shows that for Suleyman, strategically, Malta and Hungary were extremely much more important than Crimea. And Suleyman was prepared to sacrifice Crimea, lose Crimea, but not lose Malta. Anyway, we are nearing the end because time is flying. Malta was lost. They had to escape from Malta, leave first on the 8th of September, but then they came back to St. Paul's Bay just for a couple of days, and then they realized they had to leave definitely, also because of the weather, and they left on the 11th of September. Suleyman was extremely angry with Mustafa. He demoted him on his return to Istanbul, but he was still generous with the soldiers who took part in the siege of Malta. And right until April 1566, we can see Suleyman writing out commands so that the soldiers, the Azabs, the Sipahis, etc., who fought in the siege of Malta would be rewarded with promotions or with a rise in salary. So he was a strong man, he was a powerful man, he could be cruel and punish people in a very terrible way, but he was also generous, and he therefore deserves the name of Kanuni, Suleyman Kanuni for the Turks, for the Ottomans, Suleyman the lawgiver, the lawmaker, and Suleyman the Magnificent for all of us. That's all for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Goodbye.